Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Especially in the chat. So welcome to Brother Ijaz again and Hamza. So this is the part 2 to the historicity of the crucifixion, which hopefully everyone watched the first part, because very much today we're sticking on those points of the claims that were made. We put a challenge out, the last one, and one person joined, but we didn't get any others. So we thought, why not do it again today, give people a chance, the time to prepare. So this is all comers are welcome to come on, and I'll be putting the link out regularly. We'll allow one person on at a time, and when you come on, you've got three chances, so 3 claims that you want to be discussed, and yeah, we'll take it from there. So should we first clarify what the claims were, Hamza?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, I'm not going to go through all the claims right now. I mean, to be honest with you, we did the whole video. And the whole video was challenging the historicity of the crucifixion. And in that video, we challenged the historical claims outside of the New Testament, the non-Christian historians, and all of these other angles. We also then looked within the New Testament. We also looked at the history of what was being claimed to have happened and such within the New Testament. Mm-hmm. We looked at the manuscripts with regards what happened with regards to crucifixion and all of these things. So we covered a lot of stuff. And then we invited people to come on and question what we'd said, basically, refute what we've said. And then, like I've said a few times now, we felt that was unfair because a lot of the things we said would have come to a shock to a lot of Christians at that point. So we said, we'll do this second one so people have had time to digest it, time to speak to their pastors and their friends and Google and YouTube and all of these kind of things and come to refute what we said. So what we're doing here today is you need to come to challenge something we've already said.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers.
I like the blue. That's a good color on you.
MashaAllah.
So we're here to hear you challenge what we've already said. So I need to keep re-emphasizing that. Don't come on and then just start going on to a preach mode and whatever it may be. You need to come on and say, well, you said that, and I don't believe that is true, and here's why. That's it right now. Maybe later we'll allow extra things, but right now let's just underline everything we've said so far, so we can confirm those things are true, and then you Christians can deal with the ramifications of that.
Inshallah. So we already have Sahi Luke in the back chat, so that's good because he obviously, hopefully, he now knows. He came on last time, but now hopefully he knows and had a bit of time to prepare some points. So we'll welcome to Luke again.
What's up, guys? Can you guys hear me or see me?
We can hear you. We can't see you.
All right. I'm sorry about that. I just got a last minute notice that you guys were going live. I didn't know. I just stepped outside right now. Was having a meeting, but I have a few points on my phone right here that I would like to bring up. I didn't get a chance to finish all the video, but I did my best to put a couple timestamps briefly on some of the things you said, so we can go back and verify.
Okay. Go ahead.
All right. First thing I'd like to point out.
Just 1 second, Sahih Luke.
Sure.
Do it point by point. So you make 1 point, we respond to 1 point. Yeah?
Sure, no problem.
Okay.
Well, I first off like to thank you guys for having me on here, and I give all glory to the triune God, Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. At about the 51-minute mark, Mr. Ijaz, roughly that timestamp, I believe you said, and I'm paraphrasing it, but I have it right here on my phone. You said, I beg Christians to read Psalm 37, verse 28, and see how it relates to Jesus on the cross. However, I like to point out that Psalm 37:28 doesn't mention or allude to or hint of the crucifixion or any crucifixion at all. That is, I see that as an employment of maybe a misunderstanding of the text. Previously, you required solid evidence of the crucifixion or something alluding specifically to the crucifixion, but that's not what we see here. Specifically, verse 28 did say, for the Lord loves justice, and he does not forsake his saints. And then it says they are preserved forever. So does that mean no person would suffer death? Well, of course not. But let me quote for you what Dr. David Jeremiah says. He says, this verse can be interpreted several ways. God knows every situation and takes care of his. Or God knows that each person's days on earth are but a breath when compared to eternity. See Psalm 103, verses 14 through 18. Now, that's just one scholar. I have Adam Clark and a few others. But my point is that scholarship doesn't agree with your statement that this verse or this context is appealing to the crucifixion.
Okay, so Sahih
So
Luke,
you agree? So you agree then? That's
Sahih Luke, pause. Yeah. What context did I make that point? And I said, look at the crucifixion, Christ's words on the cross, then read that verse. So the verse is rendered as, for the Lord loves the just, and he will not forsake his faithful ones. Christ claimed to have been forsaken by God, and if he's God, he's speaking in truth. He claims to be forsaken by God. God himself says in the Psalm, he does not forsake his faithful ones, therefore Christ was not faithful. I see that as a disparaging claim against Christ himself. So you have to read the entire Bible in context. I know that missionaries love to go to Psalm 22, but there is more than one passage in the Psalms which speak of being forsaken by God, and that is in that context. That's, by the way, an ancillary claim, an auxiliary claim. It's not an essential core claim that we've made. It's a point to the side to provide context as to why Muslims would also possibly disagree with the crucifixion. That is not one of the core claims that we made. Do you have a core claim that you were responding to, or are you only responding to claims on the side which we brought up in commentary and discussion?
No, I'm going to bring up a few that I put down that I have on my phone. I have about 20 that I have at home.
Okay.
Like I said, I wasn't...
Bring the strongest one for us.
Let me check my phone right here. Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Hamza, I don't have the timestamp right here, but you said Jesus.
You don't need the time. Listen, Luke, stop. Luke. We're not going to argue against whether we said it, whether we didn't say it. Let's just hear the claim. Don't worry about timestamps. It doesn't really matter, okay? No worries, dude. Keep going.
Yeah, well, I'm abiding to your rules that you told me. So just to make sure I'm not misrepresented.
No, you don't need timestamps.
Fine, I won't worry about timestamps. You said, Mr. Hamza, that there were no eyewitnesses. Well, actually, John was an eyewitness. We see that in chapter 19, verses 25 to 27. Now, hold on. Now, we can appeal to archaeological evidence or external evidence as to John. But the point I'm making in regard to John is P5. And what I have right now on my phone is that I have been in correspondence with Daniel Wallace's team from the Center of Study for New Testament Manuscripts. And I have a recent email from research coordinator Leigh-Ann Hyde, who noted an awesome recent finding of an intern working on John 20 in manuscripts. And he discovered P5 contains John 20.
Two things there, Luke. Two things, Luke, two things. Just very, very quickly. I'm not going to let you ramble. Two things. Luke. First thing, I didn't really speak about eyewitnesses. Second thing, who is the author of John?
As I just appealed to, we can get into John is the author of John, Mr. Hamza. And let me finish. Mr. Hamza, please allow me to finish. And if you want to ask me, how do I know John wrote John? I would gladly provide that for you.
So you don't know John wrote John. You believe John wrote John.
And he's reading the presupposition back into the claim. So start with your core claim. Let that be the point. Don't have a point where you have to make assumptions. Because I love it when people bring for me datings which have not been added to the list, LISTE. So when you want to bring these claims, I'm happy for you, but we do not abide by singular manuscript datings. We await for the body of scholarship to do a comparanda. So you're free to make singular claims. I don't doubt that you, as a Christian, would need to do that, but we are responsible people, and we like to see the comparanda that is used to provide the dating. Do you have the comparanda in the email that they sent you?
I do, and I'd be more than gladly to send it to you.
What is the comparanda that they gave you?
Can I finish my point, Mr. Ijaz Ahmed Hamza?
It's a simple question. You said you had an entire email. What is the comparanda that they gave you for that dating? Tell me.
I asked them because I've been in correspondence.
I didn't ask what you asked them. What is the comparanda that they? It's a simple question, man. You went to manuscript experts. So any manuscript expert, when they date a manuscript, they give you the comparanda. So what comparanda did they give you? Please tell me.
I don't have it right now on me, Mr. Ijaz. I gotta look for it real quick.
Is the word comparanda in the email at all?
I'm not sure if it is or not. I can look for the email right now, but can I please finish my point and I can go back to that? No problem at all.
Sure. You can continue waffling. I don't mind.
But the point is moot. Because
you asked me for
I'll explain to you. I'll explain to you why your point is moot. Okay. We did allow I usually challenge the authorship of the New Testament without a doubt. Okay. I never made a claim about eyewitnesses.
Yes, you did, sir.
Yeah, I never mentioned eyewitnesses, me personally. And you said I said it.
With all due respect, I disagree. I have the timestamp, not right here, but I have it. And you said, if you go back, that you said there was no eyewitnesses accounts. So I'm challenging your claim.
No eyewitness accounts to what?
To the crucifixion.
Yeah, sorry, I'll go back on what I said. Timestamp me. When did I say that? We didn't even talk about that.
You mentioned it, sir. If I'm wrong, I have no reason to apologize. But
No,
I wrote
wrong. No disrespect, Luke. No disrespect, Luke. Last time you came on, you were wrong twice off the bat. And I'm telling you, bro, this is third time's a charm. I'm telling you, bro, you're wrong again.
Mr. Hamza, with all due respect, you made that statement that there are final witnesses.
Okay, listen, Luke. Listen, Luke, drop off, find your information, and we'll bring you back on, all right?
No, can I finish my point? Or would you like me to? I'm appeal to talk to John. I'm ready to talk to John about John to show that the crucifixion is historically testified. Are you not ready to speak about John?
Listen, I don't want to go into is the New Testament a reliable source of information?
Challenging I'm not going there. I'm just.
That's where it will go. But that's where it will go because I don't care what John says. Understand? I don't care what John says because I don't believe it's a reliable source of information.
You asked me to bring a source.
So it's irrelevant.
You asked me to bring a historical source showing that the crucifixion is something attested to by history.
Outside of the New Testament. Outside of the New Testament. The New Testament is not historical.
Right, so you guys had no problem appealing to those manuscripts afterwards. Actually, Mr. Ijaz, if I'm correct, said show him something within the first 3 centuries.
So Darren, let him make his point because I want.
Yeah, try. I'm still trying to work out what the main point is. Can you simplify it, Luke? Or
right. So to paraphrase, and keep in mind, you guys, I just stepped outside right now, so I don't have everything, but I do have my timestamps. But the point is that P5, there's been new discovery regarding P5 and what P5 has said. I have the email. I can send it to you guys. Is that this is an account of the crucifixion. It's made clear by verses 19 and 20, 22 through 25, uncontestable as to is it speaking about the crucifixion or not. So this is a third century. So I would like to appeal to that.
Oh, now, that's brilliant. Let's just pause there. So you say you have the email on your phone. Pull out the email and tell me what's the comparanda. I would love to hear it.
All right, Mr. Ijaz.
Look, I don't hear the comparanda. You said you're on your phone right now, and you have the notes that you're reading on your phone. So it's strange that you have the notes on your phone, you have the email on your phone that you're using right now, but you still can't read out the comparanda for us. I just find that strange. Do you have a problem?
It's not strange. I just need to look for the email because I receive a lot of emails. I'm in my notes section right now.
Oh my goodness. Well, all email apps have a search feature. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Come back.
Yeah, you know what we do have someone else in the back chat. If you want, Luke, you could maybe get it, and then I could let someone else on the claim, and then bring you back because obviously that's something quite important, maybe for you to get for us.
Well, I mean, it's real simple. The subject that's compared to is early manuscripts.
One sec. So, Luke, I'm going to tell you this though. I guarantee the email does not mention it. I guarantee you did not ask them for it. I guarantee that in that email you asked, do we have any manuscript that mentions the crucifixion? They sent you some notes. You probably have it on your phone right now, but you know that you don't have any comparanda and it's a singular dating. And you would know as an adult, we do not take singular attestations for datings. New Testament textual critics always rely on comparanda. What is comparanda, Matthew? Luke. What is comparanda? Just remind me again.
If I'm understanding, it's something that is compared or the subject of a comparison.
With what?
What do you mean?
A comparison with what?
Earliest manuscripts, as my email states, earliest manuscripts regarding the crucifixion within the first 3 centuries.
And they tell you what the comparanda is? So you're reading from the email now. You have it in front of you.
I'm looking for it right now, Mr. Ijaz. I have a lot of emails.
Okay, we'll give you 5 minutes. Come back.
Drop off 5 minutes. Come back with your information. No problem.
All right,
read it for us. Yes.
We'll come back. I think the thing I found interesting there was that you sort of gave the impression that it was last minute and you hadn't were on, but you had a lot of timestamps and all that ready.
Yep, he said.
Yeah, I have them at my house. I only have several on my phone right here. So I stepped outside because I just found out you guys were going live. So I was prepared to challenge your claims.
Okay. Do you want to spend 5 minutes getting that, and I'll get someone else on, Luke, and then I will bring you back in. Is that okay?
Yeah. Can you bring me back in though?
Yeah, you'll be in the back chat. Yes. You'll be in the back chat, and then we'll bring you back in once the next person has said his claims. Yeah.
Perfect.
All right. Sounds good.
I think could I just say something very quickly? Because mashallah, you guys again, you're showing someone as ill prepared to really deal with the topic that was raised. But I think it might be useful because what you're saying is that what seems to be happening is that people are picking almost the leaves of the tree and not going for the trunk. And the main arguments that were presented by yourselves, a few days ago, no one's really touching them at all. And I think it might be useful just to reiterate the main thing. So, I mean, I wasn't unfortunately able to be at the last stream that you had, but the points that you really made were a few. So one of the things that you mentioned was in your presentation was specifically about the verses related to the crucifixion are very late in their extant manuscript existence. Mm-hmm. So if you were to go and find them, they're very, very late, 3rd, 4th, and even somewhere even 19th, which was amazing. Sure. The other point was raised the lack of historicity of the claims of Josephus, etc. And you gave a few of the sort of well-mentioned historical writers, and we showed why they weren't viable, namely because all of the extant manuscripts that we have of them, they're all very, very late, 8th century, 9th century, 11th century, and some of the things they said couldn't have been said. The third thing that was mentioned was actually the inconsistencies within the New Testament narrative about the crucifixion itself. Mm-hmm. So this was, Hamza was allowing, I mean, he doesn't normally allow this, but he was allowing, let's take the Bible as it is. Mm-hmm. And even within that, if you take the narrative, if you compare it between the Gospels, they don't make sense. They don't correlate. Even although the topic changed a bit and it got onto whether or not that would have been enough time for the person to die, etc. That's a different perspective. Yeah. But those were the three main things, and I haven't seen anyone come up with anything so far. Admittedly, only one person so far. So those are the three main things we'd like people to try and come and. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add to that. See, the whole point of, if you look at the title of the original video, it's Historicity. We're looking at the historical context here. So we're looking at the non-Christian history claims, and also we're looking within the New Testament. Are these events that occurred within the New Testament, can they be historical? So we question for example, the zombies at the crucifixion. We question how could Jesus be tried for blasphemy when in Jewish tradition it takes 24 hours give 24 hours to recant. We spoke about how you can't try someone on the eve of a festival. We asked the question which what's the word, tradition did a Roman governor release a prisoner on the Passover? I mean, these are all things that are put down in the New Testament as if they're historical events that occurred, and we're questioning the history. Yeah. Now, if you start saying, "Oh, John was there," you're gonna fire me up, and I'm gonna say, "Who's John? How do you know John was there? Who told you John was there? Why do you believe John was there?" And all of this kind of stuff. And then we're going to move into higher criticism. Then we're going to start questioning the authorship, and we don't want to do that. I kept it very, very light. We kept it very, very light. We just looked at the inconsistencies between the Gospels, timings and such. We looked at the sign of Jonah, for example. According to one gospel, when the Jews were asked for a sign, they were told, "You'll be given no sign," according to the Gospel of Mark. They asked for a sign in the Gospel of Matthew. Now, all of a sudden, it's going to be the sign of Jonah. But even that makes no historical sense, because it was the Jews asking for a sign. And if the sign was supposed to be inside the belly of the earth, and whatever it may be, then Jesus should have appeared to them after his crucifixion, because that's the sign. So he says so even that doesn't make any historical sense. So these were the things we were asking about. History. You can't just say because it's in the New Testament it's historical, because we're questioning the historical narrative.
Well, the historical narrative has many issues with it, and I'm hoping that a Christian comes. Do you realize he started with Psalm 38:27, right? He didn't start with a core claim. He went to something that was a side comment. Like, just read how that verse characterizes Jesus. That was the context in which it was made. But that we did not use that to disqualify the historicity of the quote-unquote crucifixion.
And this is the whole point.
Do we have a Christian that's willing to challenge any of the core claims?
Shall we see? We got one in the back chat. I can let him in. His name is Yusuf. So welcome to Yusuf. So Yusuf,
Salam alaikum. Can you guys hear me?
You might have a tab on. Can you turn your YouTube? I can hear echo.
Yeah, let me put in my headphones. 1 second.
Unprepared. What's going on?
I see a lot of chat in the comments. Where are these people?
Yeah, anyone was
Matachi was in the comments. He seems to have been a runner, right? You know, they abandoned him and fled.
So Yusuf, welcome. Are you a Christian?
Hello. I I'm practicing Islam. Before Islam, I was a Christian. I've kind of been bouncing. Beforehand, I was bouncing back and forth. I really didn't, know where to go. And then, something hit me, a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, I need to get back to Islam. And the reason is because Islam makes some very good points. And I only say that because I've read a lot of the Bible. I've read the beginning, a lot of the beginning, the Old Testament, and the ending of the New Testament, mainly Revelations, mainly when Jesus, was resurrected.
Okay, so
and all I can say is
Yusuf, so have you come on with any claims to sort of challenge the panelists?
So I mean, on my way of looking at it, I believe that if Jesus was,
Yusuf, have you come to challenge what we've said?
So
yeah, are you here to support
so the
challenge?
challenge is the challenge is was Jesus crucified? Is that the challenge?
No. Okay. Jonathan, please, can you
all right. Yusuf, we got another one back in, but maybe if you I don't know, watch the first stream for a bit, and then maybe you can come back.
Then you'll understand what we're doing.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for coming on. They got a
Just to be clear, we're not planting people. These are actual people volunteering themselves.
This guy looks serious.
Yeah, this guy's
yes.
He's got a serious name, so
he's making a statement. Welcome to the panel. What can we call you?
Good evening, gentlemen. I've just called me. I know Hamza actually. You can call me Richard Hamza.
All right, Richard Hamza.
No, I'm Richard.
Okay. Yeah.
Mr. Ijaz said in. I listened to the about 37 minutes of your video, and I found a lot of discrepancies. One of the weird things, I'll give you one example. What does Ijaz mean? Think that the verse in the gospel where it says "De Jesu palin kreses phone megale ephevins to pneuma." What does he think that means when it says that Jesus cried with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit? What does he actually think that means?
So it doesn't say his spirit. I guess that in Greek you can use a definite article as a pronoun, but in this case it is actually used as a nominum sacrum in the Greek New Testament manuscripts.
Yeah.
So it literally says, and Jesus gave permission to the Spirit. What do you think he gave permission to the Spirit to do?
So you don't actually think that it actually says he gave up his spirit? You don't accept that as a valid translation?
The Greek can be read both ways, that he gave permission to the Spirit.
All sort of valid scholars would translate it, he gave up his spirit. Now, you quoted some translations of the Bible. You quoted some translations of the Bible, but you didn't quote any literal translations. You quoted things like the NIV, the Good News Bible, but you didn't quote things like the ESV or the New American Standard, which translates it very well. And it says he yielded up his spirit. So what do you think he actually meant by that expression?
Is it just me? Can anyone hear that?
No, I can hear him. I can hear him fully. So
what do you actually think he meant?
I believe in my mind he gave permission to the Spirit to do something. I don't know what he gave permission to the Spirit to do.
So you don't believe it was that he was dying?
I do not believe Christ died. No.
So what was the context? Where was he at the time, according to the scripture?
I do not believe in the New Testament Gospels as a historical narrative. I
don't believe him anyway, so it doesn't really matter, does it?
That's good, right. So my point
is, the context is he was on the cross, wasn't he? So what would it mean if somebody was on the cross and he yielded up his spirit?
So again, if Christ, as the Gospels present him, is God, or he's a prophet of God, and he still had the ability to give permission to the Spirit, you would know that in crucifixion, you would not be able to breathe. You would actually be suffocated to death. The point that he still had the ability to cry out in a loud voice and give permission to the Spirit means that he had either authority over the Spirit or authority through the Spirit. and the Spirit did something onwards. The rest
But
of the
nobody
Gospels,
translates it like that. They just said he yielded up his spirit. That is the standard translation of that passage.
So let's be
The
clear.
actual word is aphaken, which means to give up, to relinquish. And it says ta pneumata, pneuma, which is the spirit. He gave up the spirit. That's the actual Greek there.
Give permission to the Spirit.
No, it doesn't. It just says he relinquished the spirit.
Relinquish the Spirit
it's got
to do
the
what?
definite article in front of
It
spirit.
is. It is. Yeah, that's why I said the Spirit. It doesn't say.
But
give
what
up
do
his
you
spirit.
think he was actually doing, though?
Richard,
I
what did
believe- Yeah, hold on.
What do you actually think was going on in that expression? What do you think was
Richard,
going on?
what did he say that you're challenging?
Well, I'm just saying he was saying that this doesn't prove that Jesus. But what I'm asking, what do you actually think was happening at that
Well, it doesn't
point?
prove it.
So
No, I'm asking you, what do you think that expression meant when it said that Jesus gave up his spirit?
that he gave permission to the Spirit to do something on his behalf. That's all it means.
What would he?
Simple.
What?
It could have been
And in the
anything.
context of the fact that he was being crucified,
Allegedly.
and the context that was the last thing he said, how would that be?
We don't know that is the last thing he said. All we know is that that's what the gospel writers.
But this is the
included.
context. The context is crucifixion. I
That's
mean,
what
you're
we
trying to
believe.
say that this. I mean, you're not really giving an explanation of what was being said, and you're ignoring the
I'm not
standard
ignoring anything.
translation. The
So, hold
standard
on,
translation
hold on.
of that scripture.
So are you saying therefore? So hold on, Darren, give me a sec with this guy. I actually like him. So let's get down to this. So you're saying that we're only allowed to use Christian translations in the way that they understand it.
No, what I'm saying is you can use reliable
So
translations.
stop. Do you know Greek? If you know Greek, is not the word used also be used to give permission to something?
That's not the actual word.
No, that's the question I'm asking.
The word is to give up. It's to relinquish.
No, when you look at Strong's lexicon, the word also includes the ability to give permission to something. Do you
Yeah,
agree
but you
or
have to take into
disregard it?
account the context, Ijaz. You have to
So
take
are you-
into. You
so are
can't
you
just
saying
pick
that
which
someone-
meaning you want.
Right, so
You
stop.
have to
So are
take
you
into
saying
account
on
the
the cross?
context.
So are you saying on the cross, Christ cannot give permission to something that the context prohibits him from giving permission
Well,
to do
the
something?
context would be
No,
that if
answer
that was
the
the last.
question. No, I'm not asking you what the context is. I've asked you a simple question. Please try
Well, the context is very important, Ijaz. You
I
don't
know.
just
Answer
use
the
words
question.
and ignore the context.
Answer the question. Does the context rule out that Christ cannot give permission for someone to do something? It's a yes or no answer. It's simple. Does the context dictate that he cannot give permission
I
to do
don't think
something?
the context is indicative of that.
All right, so you say it rules out that meaning of the word,
I would
yes?
say it's not indicative of
No,
that.
so
And
then
in
you-
context
right,
with
so then
everything else
your
that was
point is
going on.
meaningless. So then if your point was it cannot mean that, and that is not your point, now you're saying you don't allow that point, therefore
But
you're
you're
not
not-
making a counter argument. You are,
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, Richard, you brought a straw man to the table, right? I'm not arguing against, or we're not arguing against that the New Testament claims Jesus was crucified. Okay, we're not arguing against that. We're arguing is that historical? So we're arguing whether within the events that occurred within the
So
New
then
Testament
why
are they historical
use-
events that occurred?
so then why
and we're asking,
use-
is there anything outside of the New Testament that
That
corroborates?
So
One
if you
second,
go-
Richard.
if you-
That corroborates it. But you've come on to try and convince us that the New Testament claims Jesus was crucified.
No, I'm just pointing out to you.
But that's a complete straw man because we're not arguing against that.
It's not a straw argument because you brought it up. Ijaz used that
Challenging the
argument to say-
historicity of it.
No, he was using that argument to say that this wasn't proving that Jesus died. This expression
Because
here
the
that he
word
gave up his
does not
spirit
say died there.
wasn't proving that he died. What else was it proving them in the
That he
context of
gave
the passage?
permission, that
And
he
you've
gave
just admitted
permission.
that the New Testament, you said, does teach that he died on the cross. So why would you
What was
then
it?
try
Okay,
to
the easy
disprove
question
it
for you,
using the
Richard.
text?
What was Jesus' last words on the cross? Richard, what was Jesus' last words in the cross historically?
I can't remember, to be honest. There are many expressions he gave on the cross. One was, "It was finished."
Yeah, exactly.
So it may have been, he may have said, "It is finished," and
Sorry?
then yielded up his spirit. It doesn't actually say what he cried out in this passage here. It just says
So
he
I
cried
think,
out.
could I just say something very briefly?
Yeah.
And I think, Chris, this is probably one of the problems that we have as non-Christians when we look at the Bible. We understand that you obviously have a theological view on what the text is and what it means and what the context is theologically. But we're looking at it as non-Christians. Obviously, you don't have the same theology as you do. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to reconcile the information that we have at hand. So if we and Hamza's question really is pointing towards that. So when you look at, say, something very simple, even look at the sign that was over the head of Jesus in the crucifixion. And the reason it's good to look at something like that is because that's an objective thing. That means whoever was there would have seen the sign, and there wouldn't have really been a reason to get the sign wrong. And you can compare it through all of the four Gospels to see what the sign said. Now, eyewitnesses to a material object that is not changed, depending on who looks at it, would have the same answer for this question. It's not an interpretation of events. But we see that, for example, in Matthew, it says, this is Jesus, the King of the Jews. In Mark, it says, the King of the Jews. In Luke, it says, this is the King of the Jews. And in John, it says, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. So just taking something that's objective, like this is not something that you can look at and be mistaken.
So do you think there was a sign over his head that said something about the King of the Jews?
So let me explain to you what I'm saying.
So
what I'm saying to you
was, isn't it? From those four Gospels, it's fairly clear that there was a sign that said something about the King of the Jews. So wouldn't you say that's the conclusion from four accounts?
No, Chris, so you're missing the point. Chris, let me make my point. So the point that I'm making is that you have something that was objectively there, that everyone could have read, like a no entry sign, but everyone said the sign was something different. Now, what that leads to...
They all agreed about the basics.
I understand. This is why I'm talking about the theological point. So all that shows you is
multiple eyewitness accounts work.
So this is the whole point. This is the whole point. So what this demonstrates is that there are some things that are not correct about the narrative itself. Now, I chose the sign because I thought it would be sort of a neutral thing, but it demonstrates the point that actually the differences between the Gospels on the narrative is great, more so with John and the Synoptic Gospels. And this is what's the problem is that we're having, is that you're bringing a statement about the last thing that would have happened to Jesus, but depending on which Gospel you read, and initially they weren't together in one book, they were all separate in different areas distributed, you would have got a completely different idea about what actually happened at the crucifixion. So the point that's being made here is that even this word that's translated as gave up the spirit has another meaning that could be applied to it. Now, that doesn't make it, we're not saying that that's necessarily the case to be, but we're saying that this is a reasonable alternative to take if you look at the words and what could be done with them. So now this is in the context of the whole discussion, i.e. the lack of extra biblical evidence for the crucifixion of Jesus, the lack of internal coherence between the Gospels, and we've mentioned just one thing from amongst that. And on top of that, there are other things that we could mention as well. And it's really, what we're really asking for someone to do is to not maybe pick a point that's in almost minutiae, but actually deal with establishing the historicity of even the text that you're presenting. So the first thing to do would be to...
up a point that Ijaz made.
No, I appreciate that.
I didn't pick this point. Ijaz gave this point as an argument to say that this doesn't prove that Jesus died on the cross. But what does he actually mean?
So what I
in the context.
Right. So hold on, Christ. What I said myself was that the translations at that point in English read, and he died. And
no, you just picked some translations. You didn't pick reliable translations. I could pick 6 translations of the Quran that are different.
You want to have a conversation, you've got to allow me to speak, right? So sure. I think you would accept I know why I used what I used. So all I did was
translations. You didn't pick accurate translations. Okay.
Richard, just let him finish this point because he's trying to just make the one point.
But that is part of the problem I had with what he was saying. He was not using reliable translations.
And I think Ijaz is responding.
My point was that the translations that I used were unreliable. Hence why I said the Greek does not say and
there's unreliable translations of the Quran. So what? What does that prove?
Oh my goodness. So what was the context in which I mentioned that point? I was trying to say that the translation was unreliable, and you've just agreed with me that it was unreliable. So what is your point of disagreement?
My point is, why would you just pick unreliable translations? Why not pick reliable translations like the New American Standard Bible or the ESV?
I'm trying to show people that when they open their New Testaments and they see the words there, and he died, that is not what the text actually conveys.
But I believe that's what the text meant. That's what it actually was
describing. And you're free to believe whatever you want. You could believe that Jesus is God.
Okay, but you haven't given me an explanation to what giving up your spirit means. You haven't explained what it means.
I've already said to you
I think we're done, actually, here, Jazz. I think we're done on this point.
So you can do a runner. I don't mind.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not doing a runner. I think we're done.
Richard, at the point where you don't know what Jesus' last words were on the cross, yes, we are done.
I think it is.
So thank you for your time. Thank you for your time, Richard. But you haven't made a meaningful response to the main points that we made.
I think you didn't make a meaningful point to start with. To be honest,
I'm happy that you agree with me that the translations were incorrect. That was the point. Thank you for agreeing with me.
Some translations, of course, but you only picked translations that were not reliable. Deliberately picked those translations. And if you actually understood Greek, you would have picked a reliable translation.
Oh my goodness!
Instead of picking some dodgy ones. Anyway, fine.
I feel as if people like this are either insolent or some way.
Well, now you're getting personal. Now you're doing an ad hominem. That's not actually.
I'm trying to show you that you don't understand the point that I made. That the translation
was unreliable.
That was my point.
Very clearly the point you made, sir.
So you agree with
very
me that
clearly I understood the point you made, and I think it was an invalid. And do you want us to go on to any other points?
You agree with me.
Do you have anything else? I guess. Do you have anything outside the New Testament? Do you have anything? Because obviously it was the historicity of the crucifixion. Have you brought any kind of?
But this was what happened with this subject. You used lots of points which I thought were just crazy. Could you tell me where in the Torah it forbids the priest to tear his clothes? Could you give me the reference?
I don't have it on hand on me, but it does forbid the priest from tearing his clothes.
So could you give me the context and the reference?
Yeah. So what we'll do, I think we'll list that reference for you, Chris. You said that the priests were forbidden to tear their clothes. Could you give me the context and the reference? Because the only reference I have for that is it's a particular set of circumstances. It's not a general rule. But you seem to claim that it was a general rule that priests couldn't tear their clothes.
Priests could not tear their clothes.
So could you give me the reference?
I'll get the reference. I will post it in the chat afterwards.
Right.
But thank you for your time.
Okay. No problem.
Richard, thanks for coming on.
I might come back later. I've got pages of them here. It was
look forward to it, mate. Look forward to it.
So many problems with your arguments. They were full of flaws. I mean, Hamza, you mentioned the Gospel of Barnabas. Does anyone really accept the Gospel of Barnabas?
What was my context of me mentioning the Gospel of Barnabas?
But you were using the Gospel of Barnabas, saying the errors in the Gospel of Barnabas. People took point out that there's errors in the Gospel of Barnabas.
But
did you remember that? Do you remember what you said?
No. Why did I?
I don't know
exactly what I said. I said it.
Yeah. So why would you bring up the Gospel of Barnabas? Do you think?
Shall I explain what I said? Shall I explain what I said? All right, I'll explain it to you. Very, very simple. Christians I speak to, reject the Gospel of Barnabas because there's inconsistencies with regards history within the Gospel of Barnabas.
That's not
the main thing they bring to me. Well, I'm talking from experience.
That's not even the main reason.
Richard, you're asking me, and I'm telling you my experience. Fair enough?
Yep.
All right.
Go on, carry on.
So, and what they say is, what? Let me speak, please.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, when I speak to Christians about the Gospel of Barnabas, they reject it, and they always go to the same point. The wine barrels were made out of wood, and this means it cannot be from that century. That's the other one, yeah. It must have come later time. So because they're talking about wooden barrels, it couldn't have been from the time of Jesus. Therefore, it's rejected as a later fabrication. Sure, and then what I say, right. So then the reason I brought it up is because that same scrutiny is not used for the Gospels you do accept.
No, that scrutiny is used. Very much that scrutiny is used.
Really?
Yeah, on the Gospels, very much, yeah.
Right, so if you find something in the Gospel that's supposed to be...
The Gospels are very accurate in their archaeological, on their geographical...
They're not even... Listen to me, Richard. They're not even reliable to tell you what Jesus' last words were on the cross.
No.
They're not even reliable enough to tell you that.
But you're talking about the comparison you were making.
They're not even reliable enough. They're not even reliable to tell you what was written above his cross. As Dr. Imran, you just ignored exactly what Dr. Imran just said. He told you the 4 different Gospels have 4 different writings. They're not even reliable for that. And then we bring it, and then, for example,
there are slight variants between the different accounts, which is what you
variants.
Would find,
they're historically inaccurate. They're historic. They can't both be the same history, can they?
Which is what you would find if they were individual eyewitness accounts. That's what you would
Chris,
find.
Can they be the same history if they're different?
But the arguments you're making are totally different. The gospel
What argument am I making? The argument I'm making is this. The argument, Richard, the argument I'm making is a very, very simple one. The argument I'm making is a very, very simple one. If you're going to reject a scripture due to inconsistencies within that scripture, use that same criterion for the scripture you have that you believe is authentic.
I've got that here, Jazz.
That's all. That was the only point I made. Now you tell me what's wrong with that.
Well, the Gospel of Barnabas is rejected not just because it's got massive errors in it. It says you can sail to Nazareth by boat. I mean, that's a huge error, isn't it? It's got lots of errors. The other reason it's rejected is because the earliest manuscript we have of the Gospel of Barnabas, and there's only one basically, was from the 16th century. So it's rejected on many accounts. So it's not something you can compare.
Do you believe John 157 is an authentic? Do you believe John 157 is authentic?
You can't.
Do you believe John 157 is authentic?
You can't compare the Gospel of Barnabas to the New Testament Gospels. It's a false.
Do you believe John 157 is authentic?
Remind me what John 157 says.
There are three bear witnesses in heaven: the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and these three are one.
No, I don't.
You don't think it's authentic?
No.
So when it's in the Bible,
it's not in any early Greek manuscripts.
Right. So when it's in the King James Bible, then you're saying it's not the Word of God.
Well, the King James Bible is not a Greek manuscript, is it? It's a translation.
Of what?
Of late manuscripts.
What manuscripts is it translated from?
The Textus Receptus.
And what language is that in?
They're in Greek, but some of those manuscripts are very late.
So it is from the Greek manuscripts.
But it's from Greek manuscripts. Yeah, I know it's from Greek manuscripts. But
you said it's not from Greek manuscripts.
Did I? Well, if I did, I was wrong. It's from Greek manuscripts, but it's not. Some of those manuscripts, and Erasmus argued that John 157 wasn't actually there. He didn't want to put it into the Textus Receptus in the first place. It doesn't occur in any early Greek manuscripts. See, we have to go by the evidence of the manuscripts.
I love that answer.
Yeah, that's something else we agree on.
But the Gospel of Barnabas is a non-starter, really.
I disagree.
Non-starter. Okay.
Shall I tell you why it's a starter? Shall I tell you why it's a starter?
Why is that?
Okay. So when they discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Dead Sea Scrolls were written by, yeah?
I know the Dead Sea Scrolls, yeah.
Look, do you know who they're written by? Which community?
Who they were originally written by, or they were copies of various things. A lot of it was the Old Testament.
No, who were they written by? Which community wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Which ones copied them from the originals, you mean?
Okay, I'll explain to you. The authors of the Dead Sea Scrolls are the Essene community in Qumran. Yeah,
but they didn't write them. They didn't.
Right, John the Baptist. All right. Okay. So the Dead Sea Scrolls are written. Okay. Yeah. Can I speak and explain?
Are we going off topic a bit? I've got two people
just quickly nail this if you don't mind. Okay, it's something to reflect upon for all the Christians. So basically, the Dead Sea Scrolls are written by the Essene community, the Qumran scrolls. Right. Yeah, and they use a particular. These are the tribe of John the Baptist, basically in the wilderness, and basically they use a particular terminology when they did their writing.
Well, I don't know.
You can disagree as you like. Okay. I know you don't know that, so relax then. You don't know. Right. So basically, learn something here now, Richard. So basically, the terminology was exclusive to the Essene community. So when they wrote something, they wrote it because of the way they wrote, okay? And when you read the Dead Sea Scrolls, when you read the Gospel of Barnabas, you find the same Essene terminology. And the question that needs to be asked is, how can a late 16th century manuscript contain the wordings of the Essene community? So that's the question that needs to be asked. We're not going to do it now. We'll do it another time.
Well,
Richard,
I could go into that if you really want me to.
Yeah, maybe another stream for that one, Richard. But I've got a couple more people coming on.
Gospel of Barnabas is dead in the water. You have to, just
and that's what knocks out your Gospels as well.
Sounds like you're in agreement with a couple of points there. All right. Yeah. So thanks a lot, Richard. I really appreciate it. We got
no problem. Nice to speak to you all. Bye.
Cheers.
Take care, Richard. See you in the park.
All right.
Maybe I lost something there, but just correct me. Did he agree that I said that the translation was inaccurate?
Yeah, he says some translations are inaccurate.
Yes.
So then I don't get the point. He said I was wrong, but we were in agreement. So he kind of like, I'm like, what?
He says some translations are accurate, but the translation he uses is accurate.
It was almost a suggestion you maybe cherry picked a translation, which I don't know.
The point was to show that the translations that use the word died there are not from the Greek. They're bad translations in the first place. That's the point of it.
And he also threw the King James Bible under the bus.
Alhamdulillah,
Okay.
something was thrown.
Bit of a Brucey bonus there. Collateral.
Let's get someone who actually understands the points on, please. Someone who likes to engage with the main points, please.
Yeah, I've got one. So we've actually got 2 people waiting in the chat. So I'll bring the next person on, who's called Mike.
Hello, gentlemen.
Welcome, Mike.
Hello.
Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Just 2 points I wanted to cover, but just to piggyback, I just wanted to share my thoughts on giving up the ghost. Just from my studies, it is a Hebrew idiom for dying, and I just wanted to share a few verses. Genesis 25:8. Abraham gave up the ghost and died in a good old age. Genesis 25:17. Looks like Isaac gave up the ghost and died, gathered to his people. Genesis 35, gave up the ghost and he died. Acts 5, this is the New Testament, same Greek words. Ananias, hearing these words, fell down and gave up the ghost. Acts, immediately the Lord smote. Oh, this is speaking of Herod, I believe. It says, because he gave not God the glory, he was eaten of worms and gave up the ghost. But just real quick, just to point out that was a Hebrew idiom for death. Jesus did die based on that usage. And you can comment if you want.
Fantastic point, Mike. I just have a quick question. What language was the New Testament written in?
Greek.
Not Hebrew, right?
No.
No. So you would agree that you can use similar terminology not to come to the same point, yeah?
Sure.
But next point. Let's hear you.
Okay. Ijaz, you had mentioned you were comparing, it seemed like you were comparing Gnostic writings and Gnostic views in light of the amount of evidence that's used to support the crucifixion. So I just wanted to just cover that real quick. There's a number of sources I could allude to, but what's your view on Basilides and Valentius? I think Valentius believed in a crucifixion, but Basilides, if I could recall, basically he claimed that he was a disciple of Matthias. Is that correct?
It's possible.
Okay, well, I'm just wondering why you said equal weights by comparing Gnostics to the overall consensus of the historical sources we have.
Okay, so this is a really simple point. Every single document, there are 3 main documents that, 3 main authors that Gary Habermas and most of Christian scholarship agree set the basis for the historical crucifixion. They quote Tacitus, Josephus, and Lucian of Samosata. Those are the 3 people we quoted in the previous stream. The point I was making was that the extant writings of the documents that are written by those 3 individuals, which mention Christ Jesus being crucified, only 2 of them mention that, by the way. Tacitus uses a euphemism or a metaphor. In any case, all of them are written at roughly the exact same time as the Gnostic Gospels. At the exact same time. So they're actually contemporaneous with each other. The only difference is that one was written by what we will call Christians and the other written by non-Christians. So in terms of the time span that they come from, the chronology, then you can say that they're on equal standing. As to
okay, so Ijaz, what Gnostic book do you think predated the Antiquities of the Jews that was written roughly 94 AD?
Off the top of my head, none that I would know, but I would argue that Antiquities of the Jews most likely predates the Gospels in and of themselves.
It predates the Gospels?
I would argue that, yes.
Okay, well, we're discussing Gnostic books. I just wanted to cover, there are other sources I just want to get your opinion on.
Okay, sure.
We covered Tacitus. Origen mentions the historian Phlegon, writing about 80 to 140 AD, who quotes and it says that with regards to the eclipse in the time of Tiberius Caesar, in whose reign Jesus appears to have been crucified. He also said Jesus showed his hands and it was pierced by nails. That's by
You said
plague.
from 140? You said from 140?
Yeah, they roughly dated
All right, yeah.
80 to 140.
80 to 140. That because you started with 140, now you've gone all the way back to 80.
No, I said 80. I said 80. Maybe it didn't come through.
I thought you said AD, not AT. It could be a difference in here and there. But I have a question to ask you, Michael, now that you're here, right? So the point that you're trying to make is that you have witnesses for these events and link these events directly to the crucifixion?
No. They're just to mention. Now, apart from these historians,
no. Did you get my point?
No. Okay, so with the historians, they're just recording the consensus of a view. They're recording what people believed at that time.
I love that answer. Thank you. Yes.
That's it. So when I'm comparing these particular sources, and I'm including, if I was to include Clement, wrote about 96 AD. Ignatius, he was born in 35 AD. He was a contemporary of the apostles. He wrote a letter to Trailians in 98 AD, affirming the crucifixion. He wrote
letter, by the way. We don't have any of his letters. I think Corpus Ignatium, the extant manuscripts, come from the 9th century CE. And I do not think that we have any contemporaneous evidence for the crucifixion itself. Are any of the authors that you quoted eyewitnesses or were contemporaneous to the crucifixion and witnessed some of the events related to it?
Ijaz, I wanted to let you know that your point of equal scales is just way off. The reason why most historians attest to the crucifixion is because of these extra biblical sources. And if you don't want to deal with extra bibiblical sources, I can go on to Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Tertullian, Origen.
Mike, you missed the memo. Okay, listen. We've already refuted the historical sources, Tacitus, Josephus, and such. Are you contesting?
You didn't refute it. It's just a different category of point.
Okay. So we did refute it. We believe we did. Are you saying we were wrong?
What point did you refute, Hamza?
We refuted Josephus because the claim is that Josephus was a non-Christian historian writing about the crucifixion, yeah?
Well, he was writing about Jesus, yeah.
And he's not a Christian.
He wasn't a Christian, no.
He was a Jew.
Yeah.
Okay, and he never became a Christian, yeah?
Why should he become a Christian?
Because what he writes.
He was writing history. I mean,
no, but he called Jesus the Christ.
No, I'm not of the view. There is a consensus view of a kernel of core elements. In other words, James Dunn, he's a scholar, and he basically, the consensus among scholars is that there is a core text that is true for Josephus. The word Christ doesn't belong in it.
No, so let's just pause here. So
but the crucifixion.
What we'll do, Mike, we're going to isolate Josephus then. Let's deal with the claim of Josephus and how we're going to refute it, yeah?
Just 1 second, Hamza, before we move on to that.
No, you can do that.
Jonathan McClatchy is in the comments. He has posted that Josephus, Tacitus are side points. They're not the main sources that historians go to. I beg to differ unless he thinks that John Mayer is not a historical scholar, that Gary Habermas is not a historical scholar. We call people in the comments, come into the room and have this dialogue with us. Hiding in the comments will not help you. Michael, just quickly, there is at least 3 quotes of Josephus in which Christ is mentioned. One of them comes from the Russian version, which is universally rejected. The 2 core kernel ones that you refer to, John Mayer does include the term, I think Josephus is alleged to have said, ton adelphon, Jesu to lemegu Christu, the one who is James, the brother of Jesus, who is the one called Christ. So it's not even the one who's called the Christ, it's just who is called Christ, meaning that other people call him Christ, not that he or Jesus.
That's fine. That's not my point. I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, in regards, so let's go to the New Testament. How do you feel about I don't know why people like Apostle Peter is rejected, or even Paul is rejected, or even John is rejected. These are multiple attestation to the crucifixion of Christ. So, in other words, when you go to the book of Acts in the first 7 chapters, Peter's speaking and he's preaching and he's teaching and basically he mentions the cross at least almost a dozen times. Half a dozen times. So he's affirming both the death and the crucifixion. That's a testimony of Peter. John, and both in Revelation and 1 John, attest to the death and crucifixion. But why do you reject Peter? Why do you reject John? Why do you reject Paul?
Okay, so very simply, those are side points. Our goal here today was to find out if there was evidence for the crucifixion. Are you therefore claiming that these writings that you've just mentioned demonstrate the proof of the crucifixion? And if so, the question is, how do you corroborate them?
Ijaz, my main point is that when you went in your video, when you took your hands and you were weighing scales as if there was equal scales for the Gnostic books and the amount of attestation there is for the crucifixion. So that's blatantly false. There are historians, there are internal evidence, biblical evidence, and you could even go to the pre-Pauline Creed. You can go to
that's Mark. An interpretation. Here's what we need. When we mean evidence, give me something.
No, that's considered evidence, Ijaz. That's multiple attestation.
No, but why should we believe it's true?
Why should you believe it's true? Why do you believe the Gnostics are true?
I don't.
Guys, hold up. Yeah. I think we're getting off track here. Mike, do me a favor, right? Name the 3 main principles of historiography for me.
I'm sorry, Jess, can you say that again?
The 3 main principles of historiography, how we judge the historicity of literature that mentions historical events.
Good question.
Well, I would say that scholars answer that question, and most of them believe in the crucifixion, including Shabir Ali and Ali Ati, who is a Muslim scholar. So
you can appeal to them, but I'm not Ali Ati.
I'm not a scholar. I don't apply that critique because I'm not either a debater or a scholar, but I can see the evidence on a novice level.
All right, so hold on.
Mike, did you watch the first video?
I did.
You did, and Ijaz explained what method of how we're going to test the historicity with those 3 criterions at the beginning of the video.
Are you saying scholars don't follow that methodology?
Well, it depends what their paradigm is. If they believe Jesus died for their sins, then of course
No, I'm talking about liberal scholars. I'm talking about the Jesus Seminar. The Jesus Seminar is 70 liberal scholars who agree on the crucifixion.
Mike, this question about historicity doesn't necessarily have to just be about religion. How do we understand historical documents, whether they're true or not? How do we attest them? That's the question. And then we can apply it.
Was Jesus crucified? And the consensus of scholars and internal and extra biblical evidence
hold on, Mike,
is that he was.
Mike, you can appeal to popularity all that you want.
But I'm not appealing to popularity.
You're saying appeal to consensus is appeal to popularity. If you don't know...
But I have the sources. I can quote from the scholars themselves.
So let me quote from the scholars for you. There are 3 main principles, right? One is the criteria of embarrassment, one is the criteria of dissimilarity, and the last one is the criteria of multiple attestation. Those 3 are used in cohesion with one another. When applied to the Gospels, we do not find those criteria allow us to extract facts from them. I'll give you a simple example. When the criteria of embarrassment is used, scholars reason that because the Messiah was crucified, this was something embarrassing, therefore it must be true. There's a brilliant video with N.T. Wright. He says, if we take Christ as we understand him outside of the world of first century Judea, then we have more questions than answers. But there's a simple response to this. If you take out the crucifixion, you still end up with almost the exact same narrative that Jesus preached, healed, and that he was persecuted. We do not need his death to answer the question, what would happen in first century Palestine without him. So therefore, on the principles of historicity and historiography, we do not need him to die. In fact, John Mayer, in his book Imaginal Jew, of the five criteria he gives, 3 I've just listed, the very last criteria is the execution of Christ. And he lists the criteria as a criteria and an evidence. You would know that that's circular reasoning when you entail that in which you seek to prove. So just based on the evidence that you've given me, you don't seem to understand the methodology. You don't seem to understand the method as it is applied to historical sources. And so when you come here and say to me, everyone else believes in it, I'll tell you this. Everyone at the time of Christ, every single lawgiver, every single Pharisee rejected Christ as God. Yet you still believe that he was a God. You still believe that he was the crucified Messiah. They did not. So if I was to appeal to consensus at that time, I would end up rejecting Jesus as the Messiah. So you need to come out of your Pharisaical mindset and learn to understand method and evidence give us results. We don't just...
Ijaz, everything you just said is just hot air. It has nothing to do with the point that if I'm quoting multiple attestation for the crucifixion.
Could I just speak to you about the multiple attestation, Mike, just for a moment? So one thing I don't understand, maybe it's the way I'm sort of looking at it, is that you mentioned lots of people that are mentioned in a book written by an individual who themselves have not written books about any events, Peter, etc. And you mentioned these people, and you say this is multiple attestation. I don't understand how this is. So if let me give you an example. When I understand the term eyewitness, what I expect is, and this is what other people expect, I generally speaking as a lay person, and they would expect that the person who's writing about the account is the person who witnessed the account themselves. Now, what you have is you have 4 contenders for this: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Paul doesn't count because he wasn't there. He's becoming a Christian, etc., and then following the way of Christ comes later through a spiritual vision that occurred later on. So he wasn't actually at the crucifixion himself. So we have 4 of these people who we have gospels for, unless you're saying there are other gospels that have been written by some of the other people who you say were eyewitnesses that you take as attestation. So the only attestations that I can see that I would take as reasonable would be from these 4 people who wrote the gospels themselves, if that's what you're claiming. We know that some of them definitely weren't even disciples of Jesus, so they wouldn't have been there present anyway. And from the narrative in all of I think at least the synoptics, all of the disciples fled the crucifixion. They all forsook him and fled. So I don't really see, maybe it's the way I'm looking at it. I don't see how you can quote. So if I were to write about an event and I say, Timothy saw this thing happening, but I signed the book, Imran signs the book. You then come along and say, well, I know I have attestation from Timothy about the event. You don't. What you have is you have my words. So what that would account as a really hearsay, if you wanted to be technical about it. I'm writing about another event. You can't then take that third person, Timothy, from my writings and say that he is now an eyewitness. Does that make sense? What I'm saying to you. This is how I'm not seeing how you can claim, other than the 4 gospel writers, anyone else as an eyewitness. How are you doing that?
Well, Luke is a sort of a historian in his own right. He's been credited at least by several scholars. But so if he's recording eyewitness testimony, so he's hanging out with Peter and John and the apostles. So in the book of Acts, he's recording the words of Peter, which give a testimony, a clear creedal testimony to the death and crucifixion of Christ. To me, that's a line of attestation.
Okay, Luke is taking eyewitness testimony. How long after the event?
Depends who you ask.
I'm asking you.
I don't know. Dating the Gospels is very difficult. Some people, 60 AD, 50
what
AD, 70 AD.
What about you, Mike? What about you? When do you believe the Gospel of Luke was written?
I believe before the destruction of the temple, so anytime before that.
So roughly what?
Well, maybe 60 AD, 70 AD. Yeah.
And how long is this after the event of the crucifixion?
Many years.
How many?
Many years.
30 years?
I said many years.
Yeah, I'd say 30 years.
Okay.
All right. So
Did
Luke
Luke ever meet Peter and the apostles?
So Luke is asking for eyewitness testimony for an event that occurred 30 years prior, yeah?
Did Luke meet the apostles, yes or no?
No, that's the question, isn't it? Is Luke getting eyewitness testimony for an event that happened 30 years ago?
Why couldn't Luke, which it is recorded, he met the apostles and engaged with the apostles, recall a conversation and meetings they had 30 years prior?
Oh, no, well, so that's the question. First of all, let's establish that's what he's doing. He's going to witnesses from 30 years ago and asking them what happened, yeah?
Yeah, or recalling the events because he's recording detailed events. So
right, and could there have been mistakes in this recollection?
Possibly, sure.
And how would you know?
Well, what kind of mistakes? There clearly is the consensus.
Okay, clear mistake. Okay, what?
I mean, you don't make a mistake that you record that Peter's probably in a half a dozen.
Okay. What did Luke say was written above Jesus' cross?
What does he recall Peter said?
No, what does Luke say was written above?
Well, if you want to go to the Gospel of Luke, he says plenty on the crucifixion.
No, what does it say above the cross? What's written?
Oh, he's King of the Jews.
Right. What does Matthew say is written?
Yeah, to me that's a silly argument. Let me explain.
Silly? Okay.
Yeah, let me explain. If there was a sign that said, for instance, this is what it said. It said, "This is Jesus. This is the long sort of version. This is Jesus of Nazareth, the King of Jews."
Right.
Why couldn't the other Gospels just record? If they were just recording it, they couldn't record the core text of that. In other words, it's not like it's wrong. It's just that they didn't quote the whole.
No, it's inaccurate.
Why is it inaccurate?
Because that's not what it said.
What that is what said?
What it said on the cross, above the cross.
No. When as an author, you're just recording. You're compressing events. You don't have to write out the whole term.
Listen, if you're writing history, you're writing the facts that happened, isn't it? Now,
these aren't historians. These are novice Greek speakers who are recording the events as they see them inspired by the Spirit.
30 years ago, yeah.
Okay, so that's quite an interesting admission. So it seems, Mike, that you're admitting that this is not history. This is because you said these are not historians recording events as a historian would or with the care of the historian.
They could be recording historical events, but they're not scholars by any right or grammatical geniuses. Mark is a very short and sweet, and he wasn't. He made some grammatical mistakes.
So what was the point about saying that they weren't historians? Because I think with there is a problem as a non-Christian. Because one of the things you said was in this, you said this was something that was written by novices who weren't historians, who were inspired by
Luke. I would consider Luke an historian.
Okay, no problem. You said who were inspired by the Spirit. Okay, so there was some divine intervention in the recording of these events. You would agree with that?
Sure.
Okay, so then for me as a non-Christian, this becomes even more problematic because the point about the sign was just a very simple point in that it's not a description of different speeches. It's not where the speaker might sort of adjust the vocabulary. It's not even a subjective opinion or even a perspective. It's not even an event described by different people. It's basically there's one crucifixion, there's one person, there's one sign, and they can't even look at the sign.
Well, according to John, it was written in several languages, but go ahead.
So, and again, this is where we have the problem. So we have these novices who are not historians, apart from Luke, you say, recording events that happened maybe 30 years ago because somebody approached them. Luke, you're insisting, and then you're saying that because of some divine intervention, this was an accurate account. But then when we compare the accounts, I mean, the sign is just one thing. There are many, many, many things. Just one point.
Matthew says, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Mark says, "The King of the Jews." Luke says, "This is the King of the Jews." John says, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews."
Yeah.
I mean, really, is that something that? I mean, as writing biographies, authors may write.
So that was illustrative of a point, and the reason for giving that, I gave the example, is because it was a something that you can't really miss. I mean, it's a sign. It's like a no entry sign or a stop sign. It's not something that's subjective. It's objective, and that's the reason for giving that example. But we could give. I mean, you can talk about
subjective as you're recording the events.
Just let Imran finish the one point, and then you promise you'll get to respond.
So, but the reason for giving that was because of its objectivity, and then you see the discrepancy within the four recordings. There are other things that you can look at that also show similar things. I mean, even the time of the Jesus was on the cross for, the last words that he said, what happened afterwards. I mean, there's many different accounts of what happened afterwards.
But do you think they can be reconciled? In other words, The issue I have with both Muslim and Christian apologists is that both books have discrepancies, but for you, it's sort of like a contradiction.
No. It can't be reconciled as historical, can it? If Jesus' last words are different in two different gospels, then both gospels can't be historical accounts.
Why do you say that? If Jesus was on a cross for 3 to 6 hours, why couldn't he have said multiple things?
His last words. His last words, the last things he said.
So the last words to one witness could have been one thing. Last words could have been another to another witness.
So they were. So they weren't his last words, then, were they? To one of the other witnesses.
Last word.
I just want to illustrate that point. I just want to illustrate this point, Mike. Let me just give you an example. So if you imagine Calvary and you imagine an individual upon a cross, so you're talking about a cross which is maybe 30 foot, 40 foot high. There's an individual who's suspended above that, tied or nailed according to the tradition.
About 10 feet high. Sure. The people would be sort of maybe at knee level, feet level, knee level, but at best. And usually they were kept at a little bit of a distance. And you're saying that there were different people were given different last words from the crowd who individually recorded these as different last words. I mean, really, Mike? Yeah. I mean, we have the account John when he's speaking to his mother and the disciple. And these are ways to reconcile, sir. I mean, listen, the fact is, does that, as a historian, let's say just from a historical point of view, how does that take away from the crucifixion, whether Jesus was crucified or not?
No. It takes away from the historical accuracy of it.
Yeah, that's the point. So one of the criteria for historicity is the criterion of similarity as well, criterion of coherence. So if you have a common thread that is consistent throughout each event, then we can say the probability of that increases historically. That's the point we're trying to make. I'll give you an easy answer, right?
Right, so the crucifixion would be attested in each gospel, so you would assume that would be.
No, the devil is in the detail.
So I'll give you an example. Mike,
I'll give you an example.
Mike, let me give you an example, right? So the words, I'll give you an easy example. In Matthew, it says that after the trial of Pontius Pilate, Jesus was put in a scarlet red cloak, right? They clothed him. And Mark, it says he was in a purple cloak. Now, clearly, if you see a fire engine in scarlet red, you're not going to say, Mommy, look at the purple fire engine. It's clearly a red fire engine, unless they were colorblind. So here is the question then. If Peter and the apostles were there, why didn't they go to Matthew or Mark and say, one of you, it's either red or it's either purple, it's not both? So that's one. There's a second problem to this then. When Christ is selected as the one to be crucified, they actually have to beat him, right? Now, it literally says that when you go to whip someone, at this point in time, there was the pre-crucifixion punishment, then there was the crucifixion punishment. So in Matthew, they go to flail him, they take off his clothes and beat him, and then it goes on to say in the same Gospel of Matthew that they put on his clothes and then they struck him again. Now, that doesn't make sense. You don't put on the clothes back of the person that you took off the clothes to beat. This is one of the examples where we know something happened, the historical method for crucifixion, and we see that in the Gospels to get an error there. It's mixed up. The sequence of events is mixed up.
And even another historical one is the fig tree situation, where
guys, this is a whole other issue.
Same issue.
We're talking about the crucifixion.
Hold on, just mute him a second. Listen, It's the same issue. I'll explain why it's the same issue. I think it's the Gospel of Mark, the fig tree happens, and then he goes and turns over the tables in the temple. And in Matthew, he turns over the tables in the temple, and then he has the fig tree experience. We're looking for history here. We're looking for timelines, and it's inconsistent. So we're challenging that inconsistency.
Those are discrepancies, though. In other words, how do you get in the mind of an ancient author? And for example, use the time in John gives a time of 9 a.m. and Mark gives a time of 6 p.m. something like that. It's off by 3 hours, and people say, "Oh, that's a big contradiction." But so can that be reconciled?
So hold on. You're saying to me we must try to reconcile these problems. So then I just saw in the chat someone say he wore 2 cloaks, one was purple and then one was red. But the Gospels, the authors only mention he was given 1 cloak to be mocked with. So if the idea is he did 2 of everything and 3 of everything, then we have to piece together, cut and paste, and then try to get a coherent narrative. And I'll give you an easy example just to demonstrate the point, and perhaps we'll move on to someone else, right?
Sure.
Papier says that Mark wrote his gospel in a disorderly fashion, right? That's a statement that Eusebius also agrees with. Here's the problem, though. If Mark did that, when we look at the Gospels today, Matthew, Mark, and Luke follow the same timeline of events. So if Mark is written in a disorderly fashion and the other 2 are similar in his narrative, then all 3 of them are immediately disqualified as being in the correct order. So just by a simple matter of looking at what witnesses who allegedly spoke to eyewitnesses said and what the writings say contradicting them, and then the eyewitnesses contradicting what the writings say, we know for a fact then that if there were disciples and there were apostles who witnessed these events, they did not seem to care to reconcile them. And what happens later on is you have to wait for the scribes to edit these texts and harmonize them, and that gives a basis for you to say they're saying the same thing. I'm saying to you, either they said X or they said Y. The law of non-contradiction plainly says you cannot say not A and A at the same time. So we're using logic. We're using the
Okay, so Ijaz, based on that point, is it your position that the gospel writings of the New Testament doesn't teach Jesus was crucified?
No, they plainly teach that he was crucified. I do not deny that at all. The point simply is they are not reliable, therefore they're not a basis for history. Simple.
Yeah, I feel like the point's been made. The point's been made quite a lot. I think. Would you fair to say we've got a queue of 3 others?
Thanks, Mike.
Mike, appreciate it, man. I think look, the point's been made, and I think people will listen. And cheers, Mike.
Real
Thanks
quick,
a lot.
guys, real quick, before you let in, Jordan.
Take care, Mike.
How do you see a difference between discrepancies, say, in the Bible as opposed to the Quran? In other words, if I was to look at the Quran in a similar fashion and select the verses when it talks about, what were humans created of. One verse says they were created of water. One says he was created of a clot. One says he was created of clay.
Listen, how many authors of the Quran is there?
Yeah, well, that's my point.
No, how many authors
Imagine if there were multiple. In other words,
no. Because look, here's the difference. You see, we believe the Quran has one author. You accept the New Testament has multiple authors. You believe these multiple authors were eyewitnesses to what they saw, and yet they contradict one another in what they write.
You would expect different views from eyewitness accounts. Quran. I'm not saying it's a contradiction in the Quran, but I'm pointing out that some could make the same claim that the Quran's contradicting itself.
Listen, if the author of the Quran is one. Yeah, then obviously he's clearly not contradicting himself. Basically, it will be another.
Well, that's your claim. I don't believe that. I believe it was a compilation.
Look, Mike. It's very, very simple. We can only go. You're going to go for what we believe, isn't it? Whether you believe it or not is irrelevant. But you can't then come to us and act like the Quran.
Why do I have to believe what you believe? You don't believe what I believe. It makes no sense.
Alhamdulillah. But the point here is this: we believe the Quran has one author. Therefore, you have to attack. You have to come to us with that paradigm.
It's not one author.
No, but we believe it is.
A third of the Quran is a forgery from ancient fables. And
look. I'll say it again to you. You can only go for what we believe. We believe the Quran is one author. You accept that the New Testament has multiple authors. And
why does the one author contradict himself? He's saying that humans are crazy.
Mike, it's just your misunderstanding, that's all.
Exactly. I'm not saying it's a contradiction, but people could say that just like the discrepancies in the New Testament.
No, but it's a contradiction when 2 people report the same history differently.
No, that's called eyewitness accounts. That's how eyewitness testimony works.
That's an unreliable eyewitness testimony.
Okay. Hey, God bless you guys. Take care.
Thank you, Mike. Nice speaking to you.
Okay.
Cheers, Mike. All right.
Just 1 second, Jordan. So
yeah,
we
go
have
on.
so many Christians in the comments, right? I just want to address 2 of the comments that they've put forward, right? So one of the comments was, why do we reject what the consensus of scholarship says? But here is the question. It's not simply appealing to the consensus of scholarship. Anyone can do that for anything. But I lay this point out firmly. There is no consensus by scholarship that the crucifixion happened in the way that the New Testament described it. The only thing that they agree upon is that 3 writings in the 2nd century from non-Christian historians in some capacity mention that Christ died. It's based off those 3 individuals who were not eyewitnesses, who were not contemporaneous to the crucifixion event. That is their basis, and that is how historiography is done. So we're not saying that all of the scholarship is wrong. We're simply saying that when we apply these methods more stringently and we look at the evidence, we are not convinced by it. So perhaps it is someone can come here and say, yes, okay, you're right that the methodology is happens in this way. Yes, this is the evidence that people agree upon. So then convince us that the conclusion that they have come to is reasonable. My claim here is that the belief in the crucifixion, by relying upon these three later authors, is more unreasonable than reasonable. That's all we're saying. And furthermore, I say again, you can simply say that, you guys are appealing to the consensus of scholarship, but that's just an appeal to popularity unless you qualify it. Every argument made must be qualified. That's how logic works, the doctrine of logic. So we're simply saying, here is what is before us. Help us come to understand it. If you disagree, give us good reasons to disagree. We're not saying that we're going to reinterpret the Bible. That's not our job. We're not saying that we're here to tell you that the Bible is wrong. That's not our job. But if we raise discrepancies, contradictions, interpolations, changes, developments, we would like for those things to be managed with so that you can continue with your claim that these are historical events that cannot be doubted. And the fact remains that they can be doubted.
Yeah, this is what we missed out of the whole thing. We're talking about history. This is the key. Historical. Obviously, if we asked Mike, why do you believe John is what John says is true, he'll say because it's the word of God. And then that's his criterion. But we're questioning what's within that. We're looking at the historical line. That's why I brought up the Gospel of Barnabas, why the Christians reject that. Because they look into it and they see this and they see that and say that can't be from that time, which is fair enough. But if you're going to come on here, please, we're challenging the history of the crucifixion. That's what we're challenging here.
Just to sort of emphasize that. So there are lots of theological problems with the crucifixion as a method of salvation anyway. But we haven't even touched this. That's a whole other topic completely.
We'll do that.
We'll probably absolutely will do that. We'll go through that. So what we're trying to do here, what's a bit much as Ijaz and Brother Hamza presented last time, what we're trying to do here is to deal with really the historical basis of the claims made in the New Testament and whether we can take them at face value or if there's a way of evidencing them that would make it reliable. And so far, we've not had anyone really talk about the extra biblical evidence or try and refute the fact that all of the extant manuscripts of the extra biblical evidence is late. Couldn't have been really said by that individual if he was not a Christian. Talking specifically about Josephus Flavius, but others as well. And no one's really sort of affected, changed the datings that that Ijaz has presented for the late existence of the verses that deal with the crucifixion itself, 3rd, 4th century onwards, and some even as late as 19th century. And also we presented many, it's just a few, but many of the internal contradictions of the narrative between the Gospels. And apart from the fact that they were just different people, so they wrote differently, there's nothing really been given as to sort of an explanation of that, especially if you theologically believe that there was a divine hand in that. So we'd expect actually much more coherence between them.
Go on, Ham. Abbas has sent a couple of messages. He's eating a chocolate cake and a cup of tea, but he's putting a couple of. Excuse my frozen picture as well, by the way. I'm making funny faces. So Abbas makes the point about Christian scholars internationally agreeing a consensus that the Gospels haven't been preserved. He made that point earlier, and he had a question, which was, if they claim that the Bible was inspired by God, then how can they have contradictory verses? So that's from...
they presuppose that because it's inspired by God, it does not have contradictions. And then they tell us that these words that we find in them are written by people writing of their own volition. Now, the thing is, if God is telling you that this is what happened, then you can't have different perspectives, right? That's the problem. The second problem is, and I need to emphasize what Michael said here. He said, well, there were different last words, because that's the perspective of the author. But if I'm in a stadium and I'm watching a race, they're running a lap around the stadium, and I turn my head and I turn back, and I see that one person has crossed, and now two other persons are crossing. Obviously, that first person had to cross before the other two. It's not that the other two crossed, and then that guy magically appeared 10 meters in front of them. So there can only be one objective understanding of what happened. Sure. Yes, you can have different perspectives, but different perspectives simply mean that you write about the same event from a different understanding. I'll give you an example. Again, the person who sees that one person has crossed the line and another who looks and sees the person now crossing the line. They both see the person crossing the line at 2 different times, but they agree that person crossed the line. So it's only one race. The comments were telling me Jesus wore both a red and a purple cloak.
Well, don't forget, in the Gospel of Matthew, he also rode a donkey and a little donkey at the same time. So, anyway, bring on the next question, man. Bring on the next one.
Book coming out soon.
Bring on the next.
What was I getting? Yeah, we've got 3 people in the chat coming on. We'll bring on Ariel next. Can I make one comment? Is I feel like the historicity part isn't really being addressed. Is that fair to say? So just advice to the new panelists that come on. I don't think we're trying to, go against what the New Testament's saying, or we're trying to get some historicity behind it, aren't we? So
yes.
Here is Ariel. Welcome, Ariel.
Hello, Ariel.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Hi.
Welcome, Ariel.
So, what's your strongest claim, Ariel?
That's fine. You can, the way you're pronouncing it's just fine. All right. So I had some question about your historical methodology. So are you saying if I hopefully I'm understanding you correctly, you are only accepting documents whose manuscript evidence comes within a couple hundred years? Is that what you're saying?
No, what we're trying to say is we're trying to establish the historicity of the event, right? So what is the criteria that you use that we have missed out on? Or what do you think is the strongest evidence for the crucifixion itself in terms of history, not of theology? That's what we're trying to get at.
And I guess I'm trying to understand why you won't accept the Apostle Paul, who claims to have met the brother of Jesus. Why is that not?
Ariel, you sound like you're underwater. Have you got? I don't know if it's your reception or.
It's his connection.
Did you hear what Ariel said there?
I heard it.
Okay, sorry.
Look,
can you hear me?
Look, the whole point was, did you watch the first video of what we did with regard to this matter?
I have no idea. No, I have not.
Okay.
All right. Because the whole point of this video is to give you a chance to refute what we said in that.
Okay. Well, I've just been listening to the previous calls.
Right. So they're trying to, they've kind of tried to attempt some of the things, but they've misunderstood things, and they've tried to add extras as well. Like, for example, we didn't mention Paul in the previous conversation, did we, Ijaz? I don't think we brought Paul into it, did we? Ijaz?
Ijaz, you're on mute.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
I said we didn't bring Paul into it, did we? I don't think in the
no, because Paul has nothing to do with the historicity of the event itself.
Exactly, because he wasn't there.
Contemporaneous, and there is no evidence that he actually met the eyewitnesses or that he related historically what the eyewitnesses witnessed about the crucifixion itself. He does argue a lot about the resurrection, but about the crucifixion event itself, he is not a historian. He does not provide historical evidence. So he writes from a theological perspective, a salvific perspective, but that is very different from history.
We're not questioning the theology. We accept you believe what you believe. We're just trying to understand why.
So let me ask you then. Josephus was writing around 90 AD, right? So he references the existence of John the Baptist, who died around 30, around there. But he's not eyewitness to that event. He's relying on other reports. Can I just throw out Josephus then as evidence of the historical existence of John the Baptist?
Your misunderstanding of our point is Josephus only records what is the popular narrative at that point. It does not mean that Josephus is claiming that this happened with a certainty, because the point stands. If he's claiming that as he traveled around Judea and he witnessed all these people doing miracles and being convinced of Christ, then he should have been convicted in that faith as well and joined the faith of Christianity. The point is, all he mentions that Christ is the one, Jesus is the one called Christ. He doesn't even say that Jesus is the one called the Christ. He says to Lamangu, I got the Greek wrong, the one who is called Christ. That's what it says in the English, I believe. That's all he says. He does not say the one who is the Christ. He does not say the one who is the Christ. He just simply says the one who is called the Christ. Simple. That's what people call him. Hamza calls him Christ. Imran calls him Christ. Jordan calls him Christ. I call him Christ.
So what I'm trying to point out is, if we have this methodology that you're using, we're going to have to throw out a lot of people who we would otherwise have historical evidence for. So we no longer have historical evidence for John the Baptist according to this methodology. So other than what we have 600 years later in the Quran, we have no historical evidence for John the Baptist. And the Christians, up until Muhammad, had no reason to believe that John the Baptist even existed, because the earliest mention of the Bible is Josephus. And we have no historical evidence for Herod the Great, for example, written historical evidence. We have no historical evidence for a lot of the figures in the 1st century, because the first manuscripts of Josephus are in the 4th century, and Josephus himself was writing 60 years after the event. And he was an eyewitness for many of these historical figures. So your methodology essentially destroys a lot of the methodology.
Well, no. So here's the problem, what you've said. And I'm sorry that we lost you, but no one can hear you in the chat. It was only us that were able to make out what you said. Guys, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, he had.
So my response to that is simple. My salvation does not rely upon the death or the life of John the Baptist. I believe in him as an article of faith, but my salvation does not depend on me believing that he died for my sins. So it's a whole different category. If you're claiming that Christ was crucified, and that's with absolute certainty, then you need to provide historical evidence that meets that level of engagement. Because here's what you're asking me. You're asking me, people that are writing 60, 80, 90, 200 years after Christ, after the crucifixion, claim that this is what happened. Now, fine, but my salvation cannot rest on something which is taken from a popular narrative and a popular assumption. We need evidence if you're going to ask me to believe in something that determines my salvation. So there's a different level of criteria here. So when it comes to the historicity of something, I agree. Most things are alone in their transmission. They cannot be relied upon, and we agree with that. Merely saying now that the crucifixion of Christ is a fact because people 80, 90, 100 years related it does not make it so. We need to know what is the basis for this claim that it is a historical fact. If there's something that you can present, we would be interested in hearing it.
And just to add one point to that, Ariel, before you join in, I think the earliest manuscript for Josephus is very, very late, 11th century, I think it is, 1184 or something like this. I think it's very, very late. So it's not even a couple of hundred years. You're talking about a millennia after the event. And some of the things are attributed to Josephus, you wouldn't have expected a Jewish individual to have written. So there was some tampering with the text. If there was a core text anyway, there was something was additionally added to that for what end we can only guess at. But it makes it, again, an unreliable source, again, for something as important as not just recording history, but for your salvation itself.
So a couple of points. The first one is, I believe the earliest written evidence we have of Josephus is in the 4th century. I think there's a codex, I think it's called Ambrosius or something along those lines. I'll have to double check.
I'm getting extreme difficulty to understand a single.
Yeah, Ariel, I don't know if you can get better internet, but the problem is we got like nearly 700 people and no one's hearing you. So I don't know if you can go into a better place or because otherwise I'm gonna have to bring the next person on and maybe.
If you still can't hear me, I'll have to bow out.
Well, maybe if you it's just that there's a lot of people obviously, and I can't. I don't think enough to work out what you're saying, but
Jonathan McClatchy, he can answer your points. All right, thank you. Bye.
Okay, so next person, Solar S. Let's see. All right, Solar. Sorry, I know you were supposed to come on before that, but the queue sort of mixed up there. But thanks for waiting.
Thank you. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum, guys. I am Arab Christian calling for Germany, and maybe my English will be not very well, but I want to ask. Okay, so basically, I want to ask Ijaz if he thinks that Sahih al-Bukhari historical accurate, because there is a report in Sahih al-Bukhari 3477 that it says Muhammad says a prophet.
All right, sorry. Unfortunately, that was majorly off topic unless I'm mistaken.
All that waited, and none of them want to speak to the historicity. I don't get it.
Honestly, the video was clear. They watched the video.
Unfortunately, so that wasn't related to the crucifixion. Unless I'm wrong, that wasn't going to go anywhere.
It's interesting, actually, as a reaction to observe that this is what's happening. Because what we're asking for is really some verification of the historicity of the crucifixion. And really, people are beating around the bush. Or even, are doing a Toko fallacy. That what about you? Which is fair enough. We can have that discussion, but we're trying to verify the historicity of the crucifixion, and that would be great to have a discussion about.
We have Hisham on here now.
He's muted, but if he can unmute himself.
Yeah, you're on mute at the moment, Hisham.
Is he Christian?
A lot of Muslim names coming on.
Like, there were all these guys in the chat, and they were like, we're going to refute you, and none of them are coming.
Is Jonathan McClatchy backstage?
Yes.
He was here. I mean, let's put the link out again. Just jump on and give your strongest point. And,
all these guys are saying that he can respond to us, but he's stuck in the chat. He can't make his way here. That's very curious. You're not going to point that out.
There's some IG 3G or something, iPhone 3G, saying a lot in the chat.
He's hilarious.
Challenging to debates and everything. And we give you a platform.
I like how the topic is the historicity of the crucifixion, and the guy is like, do you believe in Sahih al-Bukhari? Not the topic, but thank you.
I think he's trying to challenge the way that we use history. Do we believe are we using double standards? I can kind of understand his angle.
Oh, I see. Was it going too on topic then? Because I think since I heard Bukhari, I thought, well, that's not really.
I think he was going to say this thing happened, and do you believe this thing? And as soon as he said Arab Christian, and then
but frankly, it's quite
when
hard.
he said my English is not that good, you're going to lose us, man.
It's quite hard for Christians probably to hear the information that you guys have provided, and then to try and bring an argument and a response to it. It's probably been a little bit difficult, even in the 48 hours or 72 hours that you've provided. And that's just being demonstrated more and more, I think. And it'd be great if Jonathan McClatchy is around to get him on. I mean, we're inviting him.
We'd love him to come and speak with us.
Please.
I've seen that Michael, who was just on the platform with us, he mentions that we, the panelists, are not interested in discussing the historicity. Well, we did discuss the historicity with you, and you agreed that Luke was not a historian, and then you changed your mind and said, yes, he was. And then you said he was inspired. So you've got to make up your own mind, determine that what you wanted to say is what you said, and then God will return.
Yeah, this is one of the arguments I've heard. They're saying, look, imagine you see a car crash, and there's 4 different people see that car crash from a different angle. Each one will report their perspective, which is fine. But that only works if the 4 people are eyewitnesses, first of all. And then if you throw in the Holy Spirit, then they shouldn't need to use their perspective. What happened happens. So it's like a double. You can't have it all ways. Either it's inspired by God, therefore it doesn't need to be eyewitnesses, or it's eyewitness testimony, which means it needs to be eyewitness testimony. Mm-hmm. And this is the problem that we're having. Because we know Mark was an eyewitness. We know Luke was an eyewitness. We heard one church father said Mark wrote from Peter. We hear all this.
We have Hesham back. Sorry, go on, Hamza. You carry on your point.
So I know. So I'm just saying this idea that these 4 eyewitnesses, they behave like these 4 gospel writers are writing about the same event, but witnessing it from different angles. But that would assume that the 4 writers of the gospels will witness it themselves, which isn't the case. For 200 years, the authors of the gospels is anonymous. It's not like as if they were people.
Welcome. It's gone, but we have Nathan waiting as well. So welcome to Nathan.
Hello, chaps. You all right?
Hello, Nathan.
Welcome.
Coming through, okay?
Yeah, all clear.
How you doing, chaps? Right. So I want to talk a little bit about history because everyone's talking too much about gospels and things like that. So let's get to it, right? What we can all agree on is that the punishment for the Romans was crucifixion for traitors and the enemies of Rome. Mm-hmm. So we have to ask who Jesus was, right? Jesus was through the eyes of the Romans, was a rebel in Judea in around the 1st century, and his rebellion was unsuccessful. Therefore, his punishment would therefore logically be crucifixion. What do you guys think of that?
Nathan, I would have to disagree right out of the gates, because at no point did Jesus try to usurp the authority of Caesar, at least not in my estimation. And in fact, the Gospels actually record that Pilate's wife got a dream the night before that Jesus was an innocent man, and that when she wrote a letter or a message to him...
Okay, can I stop you there? Because you're talking about scripture again, that kind of stuff. Her dream is irrelevant. Jesus is a political figure who has moved into Jerusalem on a donkey.
How do you know that?
How do I know that?
Yeah.
Well, I'm using the sources of...
so you're using the scripture, yeah?
Well, in a minute, yeah.
So we can't, you can. Okay.
No, not like that. I'm just saying, so in terms of details, let's just look at the broader picture of who we think Jesus was.
No, but where are you getting information from?
We're just assuming that he's a real person.
No, where are you getting your information from?
I'm just talking about general history.
Where from?
No, what general historical source says that he was a rebel against Pontius Pilate?
Who said Jesus was a rebel?
The Roman Empire exists in Judea in the 1st century. Jesus,
right? All right, that's the fact. So go on.
Yeah. Jesus, should he exist, and for the sake of this argument, we're assuming he does. He is then a threat to Roman supremacy in Judea.
Why is he a threat?
Because he has a large following. He's countermounting the Pharisees and such. He enters Jerusalem. So,
what is your source for that claim that he was countermanding the Pharisees?
Yeah.
Well, that comes from the Gospels, but we're just assuming that
Scripture.
Yeah, but I'm not putting that down as I believe this.
No, but what you're doing is you're building your premise on the Scripture, as if it's historical.
My premise is on the reaction of the Roman authority, and that is to put down anyone who speaks out against Rome.
But Nathan, even in your narrative that because you do refer ultimately to the Gospels, even on the crucifixion, even when it was happening, there were two Jesuses.
Exactly, I was about to say that.
Barabbas as well.
Romans,
absolutely. So there were two people. There were two people. Just to make the point, because it's important. If you are saying that the crucifixion is used for a specific punishment because the Roman authorities feel threatened in some way by somebody who may usurp them, there were two people named Jesus who were on trial for the same thing at that time. So which one of them was crucified then?
We talk about Jesus Barabbas, who was released.
And he was a rebel leader,
Jesus, the son of the Father. That's what Barabbas means. Yes. Jesus Barabbas. Does Jesus the son of the Father or Jesus the Christ?
I can't say. That's in the Gospel.
So this is the problem with this approach.
I just want to bring forward that the Roman Empire would put down anybody who.
Yeah, but Nathan. But Nathan, I'll tell you what throws a spanner in your works, mate.
Yeah.
According to the New Testament, the Romans released the rebel leader and crucified Jesus. Now, Jesus was the one who told the Jews to keep paying your taxes. Render unto Caesar what's due to Caesar.
So let's move away from the Gospels and ask the question: who do we think that Jesus is?
No, let's stay on the Gospels right now. Let's stay on the Gospels right now, just so we can destroy that particular point. Then we can move on. Okay. So understand your narrative. You're saying the Romans are going to crucify someone who's a danger to Rome, and yet, according to the New Testament, they released the rebel leader. And then what happened? There was a rebellion.
A rebellion. We talk about 70 AD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it started before that.
The point here is this. If you're saying Jesus had to be crucified because he was a rebel, why would the Romans release the rebel leader?
This is a bit confusing because we're using the Gospels and as the sources.
All right, okay. Let's forget the Gospels. Talk to me about the life of Jesus without the Gospels.
Okay, who do we think that Jesus is? Because in the popular imagination, Jesus is someone who was alive in the 1st century AD, who led a rebellion of whatever sorts, and then came against the Romans and suffered.
Not a historical fact. The popular imagination thinks that he was God. That's not a historical.
It's not a historical fact. No.
Right. So you only know about the life of Jesus from the New Testament.
We're assuming that is the Jesus we're talking about.
That's
but
the
my whole point is that the Romans will execute anybody mercilessly and brutally. I've got another point about.
Executed. He was let go.
I think we should move on from this particular point, Nathan. No disrespect.
Can I just add something to that, Nathan?
It must have sounded so good in your head.
just to add something to that.
It did. It's not coming across as well.
It sounds fantastic in your head.
Nathan, I just want to say that I think when I saw you, I thought you were Muslim, and I think you'd make a great Muslim. But the point.
I revert to Islam.
Oh, mashallah. Okay, no, that's good. Okay, assalamu alaikum. So I think the thing to say is that. So you throw me with this revert to Islam. I wasn't expecting that. I just said you look like a Muslim, alhamdulillah.
Oh, so that's because I haven't had a shave because of the quarantine. Barbers aren't open.
and I've had to shave because I'm wearing a mask to work. So, so I think the point to make was that this just if you go with trying to establish history about really generally, then we get stuck with two people called Jesus who were there at the time. The idea that Jesus was not crucified is a pre-Islamic idea. So it predates Islam. So we have people from the history of the early Christians who doubted that Jesus was crucified. There were theories that it may have been Simon of Cyrene who initially had taken the cross and then carried on. So there are lots of pre-Islamic ideas about the crucifixion not having taken place that are nothing to do with Muslims anyway. All the Quran really says is that people think it happened, but it didn't really. And this is really the point. And this is so the history will record something along those lines that it happened in a vague way, like we're seeing people turning to, people who've recorded things in history, and historians just record whatever the prevailing narrative is. But they're not going to get to the point of establishing for a fact that this thing happened. And that was really the point that's being made. How's your Ramadan going, by the way?
It's excellent. It's fantastic.
Okay, alhamdulillah, that's good.
Yeah. I do have another point to make about Josephus, okay? And obviously this probably sounds a lot better in my head, but we're going to roll with it, okay, right? So I'm going to reference the Gospels just for a second, right? So what we know in the Gospels and what they all generally agree on is that Jesus was crucified with two of the chaps who were the thieves. And then he was brought down from the cross on the request of a chap called Joseph of Arimathea. So I'm just going to read a little bit of Josephus, and it says, here, this is my quote: "I saw many captives crucified and remembered 3 of these as my former acquaintances. I was very sorry at this in mind, and I went with tears in my eyes to Titus, and he told them, so immediately condemned them to be taken down, and I have the greatest care of them in order for them to recover. Yet 2 of them died, and on the physician's hands the 3rd recovered." And we know that the name of Josephus, his actual name, his Jewish name was Josephus ben Mattheo. So that's very close to Arimathea. So it looks
I
like...
think, are you trying to say that Josephus was traveling and he saw the crucifixion happening, and he tried to have the 3 people removed? Because these are 2. Because actually, I've read what you're quoting, and actually this is actually Josephus talking at another time when he was speaking to, I can't remember the person who was in control at the time, where he saw 3 other people being crucified, and he tried to save them because obviously they'd been there for a while. He felt sad. He went to Titus. He came back and said, "Let's get these people down."
In the 60s,
that's right.
Yeah, so about 70 around that time.
So this is actually another event that Josephus is describing. Don't conflate the 2 things together.
But since we can throw out the Gospels and saying that they're not exactly historically true, what is the date of the time that those events allegedly occurred, and what was the date of the life of Jesus? It's very possible that the life of Jesus could have been 70 AD rather than 30 AD. And thus the pieces fit together.
Nathan, it's been a pleasure. Come on when we're talking about more Islamic things, because we've got to give the Christians a chance, man. We thought you were a Christian. All right?
All right.
Nathan, are you a revert to Islam? Did I hear that right?
Yes.
Okay, so you believe that Jesus was crucified as a revert, or just out of curiosity, or?
Well, what the Quran says is very unclear. So, I mean, I obviously believe the Quran, but as to the details of the historical Jesus, I can just say I don't know, and I just have to look at the things and try and learn.
The Quran says nobody knows. You're all guessing.
So I just came here to guess. I came to use my knowledge of the Roman Empire and, and see how it goes. But
stay in touch.
Bye. Guys, we've got 10 more minutes. Can we get a Christian that actually has a claim that we can engage? Like, let's verify that they're Christian first, and then let's verify that they have a claim.
Jordan, please, what are you doing, mate? Christians all Quran.
Oh, we have someone else here.
Okay.
Yeah, but who are they?
I have to let this person on though. Look, you'll see why. You'll see why.
All right.
Assalamualaikum. There are no Christians in the chat at the moment. As soon as somebody comes on, I'll put them straight on. There's no one in the queue.
Really?
Where's Jonathan? Where's Jonathan? Where's iPhone 3G or whatever he was doing?
Sahi Luke said he was coming back, didn't he? Didn't Sahi Luke say he's coming back with the email and stuff? So
no, let me tell you. What is interesting about, here's the thing. In the first video, we made very specific claims with very specific references, right? So the goal of this 2 hours, it was supposed to be 1 hour and a half. We're almost at 2 hours now. Another single Christian came to say, here is some clear-cut evidence. Can you engage with it? I see that, for example, Michael went back into the chat and he's been posting, scholars say it's an indisputable fact. That's all well and nice, but we want to know how they arrived at that point. Sahi Luke said he had manuscript evidence. a runner on us, right? What we want is people to give a methodology and evidence to use that methodology upon that is consistent. A lot of people don't seem to realize that if you depend on Tacitus, Josephus, and Lucian, they don't make any claims that Christians would generally agree with. I'll give you an example. I love what Lucian of Samosata says. He says that the Christians gave Jesus every title that they can give. And I sat and I thought about it. They call him the King of the Jews, God, Son of God, High Priest, Messiah, Teacher, Rabbi. They just went on and on and on. So, there are some things that we can generally agree on that they did, but we are not getting any evidences that we can historically engage with. I saw, for example, that John T. McClatchy said, I misused the criteria of dissimilarity. The criteria of dissimilarity are things which would have been done in a way that was not expected at that time. It was expected, as Christians argue, that the Messiah would have been killed and crucified. They point to the Old Testament prophecies. So this was something that would have been expected, but the criterion of dissimilarity does not apply to it. So please, we're begging all these people who have so much to say. They're writing essays in the comments. I'm reading like dozens of them. And like not one of these people is coming up. I mean, like we got more Muslims coming to chat with. And we got Christians. And we gave them 3 days and 3 nights to prepare, and they're looking on from afar. So,
yeah. Abbas, do you want to give your sort of take on things?
Well, it's very interesting hearing these discussions, and I'm not an expert on Christianity and debating, Christians, because I think, mashallah, you guys do a wonderful job. But looking at it logically, if I were a follower of Jesus, I would want to know exactly what Jesus told me in terms of what I should believe, right? Now, if you have modern day historians internationally, some of whom are practicing Christians, churchgoers, who are saying that these scriptures have alterations, they have mistakes, they have fabrications. People have actually added things to establish a certain theology. Now, if that is the case, it is impossible to argue in the same breath that these are inspired by God, because then you're assuming that God has inspired people to add things in the Bible to establish a particular theology, which hundreds of years later is found out to be a fraud and then has to be removed. So logically, that doesn't make sense. You can't have your cake and eat it. You can't say it's inspired by God, and then you can then on the next breath say these are just eyewitness testimonies and they got things slightly wrong.
Exactly.
Either it's inspired by God or it's an eyewitness testimony. They can't be both. That's the point here. And so I sort of fail to understand how somebody can quote the Bible as a defense to their theology when in fact their own theologians, their own academics who have studied this for 30, 40, 50, and looking at what Bar Ehrman said, a lot of these critical scholarship that's happening in the last 30, 40 years, we simply didn't have the material to be able to scrutinize the scriptures the way that we've been able to do so with the advent of computers and tracking things and comparing things, mass data. And it's now become evident in the last 30, 40 years that there were huge problems before, but now those problems have simply multiplied many, many fold. And yet we have, good people. I'm not saying Christians are bad people, but, they have a great conviction. They want to worship God. They want to, they want to do what the will of God and everything else. But you've got to understand that if you can prove mass corruption within a scripture, it cannot be trustable that is exactly what God is telling you to do. And that's the issue that I find is often confused here,
Yeah. Do you think we should give these guys a part 3? Should we give them a chance?
Yeah, I think this is a final call, I guess. Anyone wants to come on now? Hang a minute.
Let me just point out something in the comments, right? There's a guy called Chris Claus in the comments. He says that the Christians don't want to come on because Ijaz is dishonest, right? Now, let me tell you who Chris Close is so everyone understands the kind of individual this comment is coming from. He gave himself the title Dr. Chris Claus so that Muslims would actually speak with him on the internet. They found him so incredible that he actually had to fake having a PhD. In fact, Jonathan McLatchy hosted this guy as a person with a PhD, later found out it was just a username on the internet, and now he's telling us about people being dishonest. Christians, what are you doing? It's not smart. May I point out something here? If you're any Christians, please come on. But I just want to add one piece of evidence to what we've said so far. Papias says, and Gary Habermas points this out in his book about Jesus, right? He says that Papias uses the word anakrisis, which means to interrogate. That Papias was interrogating the disciples of the elders. So it's like the fourth generation Christians, right? Now Papias is living at towards the end of the first century, and he writes towards the beginning of the second century. This word anakrisis means a preliminary inquiry, to the point that you're not interrogating someone, you're just asking, hey, what do you believe? What can you tell me about these things? And in Athenian law, anakrisis was just that, asking preliminary questions. How was your day? What did you do on this day? You're not asking for specific details. You're not comparing and contrasting information. It's simple questions. So even Papias did not do what these guys think he did to arrive at the conclusion that Mark and Matthew wrote Gospels. So we want guys who can challenge points like that. I don't want people to come here and tell me Jesus died for my sins because on the cross he said these words. That doesn't help me. It's not historical. You get the point? My goodness.
Yeah. Well, and here's the point, you see. If someone's trying to make the claim that you're dishonest, this is the place to expose you.
Come on. Yep.
This is what we're doing. We're bringing you on. Tell us what we've said that you think that we're I seen the comments on the video, saying, oh, Hamza is just confusing Christians, saying things that they can't respond to because they don't have the knowledge. Yeah, fine, fair enough. If they don't have the knowledge, I get it. But there's people out there with the knowledge. There's people in the chat with the knowledge. Where are you?
Yeah.
Like I say, do you want to do a part 3 in, say, 4 days?
Yeah,
time?
I think let's do a part 3 in a few days. And inshallah, I'll see if we can get some of the big boys on as well.
Yeah.
Here's what we want. Christians, if you're listening to us, you've heard us speak about the historicity of the event. We've spoken about what historiography is. We've spoken about archaeological potential evidences on what would matter and not matter. We've spoken a little bit about textual criticism, but we didn't rely upon that. We're just using data points out that the narratives have developed over time. They even had to harmonize what Jesus said on the cross because he said too many different things. So at the end of the day, here's what we've ended up with. We've been given no evidence or reason to believe that the crucifixion happened as the Gospels present it. They've not gone to Josephus. I think one guy mentioned Josephus, but he agreed with us. Yeah, there was nothing historically we can extract from Josephus to say that, the crucifixion is presented, that is what happened. So brothers, get your Christian friends, call them out. Look how nice Hamza. I've never seen Hamza this nice before. And I've spent time with this man. He was so pleasant and kind, right? Dr. Imran, coming from a very long day of doing some very life-saving work, Allah reward him. I mean, he's here today because he doesn't just care about your physical health, but also your spiritual health.
Allah.
Right?
And I think that's really, really important. So this is not done in the spirits of animosity or ridicule or anything like this. This is actually done in the sense of love, because we, as Muslims, we believe that we have a way of being in the world which will lead you to Jannah, paradise. And we wish this for everyone. So engaging these types of very important topics, talking about the evidence base for your belief, is really, really important. And it's done in a way that you would like to give somebody, invite somebody to a lovely meal and share our food with us. This is really what's being done. And if it comes across in a negative way, then we apologize for that.
Yeah. Sorry, with the mock you.
Inshallah.
Just don't say silly things, that's all.
Yeah, we've got about a minute left, and we've not seen anyone challenge the historical claims that we've made. Here's what we've gotten so far to summarize today's events. We've got someone told me he agreed with me that I used a bad translation to show it was a bad translation, and somehow that was meant to disagree with me. We had someone come and say that Luke was both a historian and not a historian. We had someone else come and say that a lot of what Josephus said was incorrect. We've had Luke come on to say he has historical evidence in the form of an email, which is on his phone that he's speaking on, but then he couldn't find the email, and he's been gone for about an hour and a half. So in all, every single Christian that came on today could not engage with the points that we made last week or this week. And we've not come up with any new evidences or reasons to believe. At the end of the day, here's what this has done for me. If you're a Muslim at home and you saw what happened today, you've just seen that the Lord of the Lords, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that they have no certain knowledge. And every Christian that came demonstrates that as the haq. That's what I got to say about this.
It's quite interesting because we've had Jonathan McClatchy in the comments, and he sort of, everyone was referring to him. So it's not like there haven't been people here who have the potential to maybe give an answer. There have been, but I don't know why he wouldn't take the offer. Maybe
this is the Jonathan McClatchy that's debated Shabir Ali, isn't it?
Yeah. So a really experienced debater and a Christian.
I think if you think the comments are about 15 people, and I think there's 700 watching, so I'm sure there's lots of people out there that maybe they'll come next time.
Well, I noticed in the comments you got that iPhone 3G talking a lot. Yeah, Jonathan McClatchy lauding about, and Twinkle Toes was here and there, I think. And but in the comment section when we advertised this video, there were so many people. Yeah, I'm going to come on. I'm going to do this. Where are you? To quote Delia Smith.
I think one other last point that I just want to make very quickly, if you allow me, is that from a Christian perspective, what they need to ask themselves is that if this revelation clearly is objectively, provably manipulated, changed, and fabricated in sections, we're not saying all of it is, then it's only rational and logical that for guidance, there had to have come another revelation afterwards to correct those fabrications and those mistakes. It's rational to believe that, because God would not leave his flock without true, unaltered, unfabricated guidance. And this is exactly what the Quran is saying. The Quran is saying that it's the what's the exact term, Imran? The corrector, or no, that's not the exact word the Quran uses.
Criterion.
Right, the criterion. In other words, to judge what has come before. And that would make perfect, rational, logical sense, that if you have a scripture that's apparently from God, yet it has been manipulated, which is accepted by most sensible Christians, to be honest, then there has to come another scripture afterwards correcting those potential errors. And so when Allah says in the Quran, Lam yalid wa lam yulad, he begetteth not, nor is he begotten, wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad, and there is nothing comparable to God Almighty, that is the correction of what was changed before. It's quite logical, but rational, actually.
Absolutely.
If I may just add one quick point, Brother Abbas, that was brilliant. May Allah reward you for that. Just one quick point. I know of an ex-Christian who wrote a book on the propaganda that some of these people use against Islam. It's a book called Consider Islam, Disproving the Patriots of Propaganda by Brother Kenny Boma. Let me just say, it's a really wonderful book, and I did enjoy it. And I did see him in the comments here today. And I was very happy, let me be clear, I was very happy to see so many former Christians in the chat agreeing with us and saying, yes, these were the same problems I saw, that my heart was on fire for when I saw these things initially, and that led me to Islam. So if you're a Christian right now, in part, God willing, you will join us. And we want to speak with us because we value each and every one of you for the sake of God.
I think Kenny Bromer is live this evening, so you can go and check him out. And Ijaz, probably a chance maybe to plug your website as well. While we've got a few listeners, Calling Christians.
So to be fair, so Calling Christians is a blog written by a very handsome and single available brother. I think some of you know him in the chat. CallingChristians.com. I am writing a book on the crucifixion. Inshallah, it should be done by the end of Ramadan. We have a couple of brothers like Brother Adnan and a couple of others that will be taking a critical look at it. And just to be clear, brothers, I spent maybe a year reading all the books on historicity, historiography, and textual criticism of the Gospels that I can, trying to convince myself that maybe there was an element of truth to this, and at every point I found a stumbling block. And the thing is, if none of these people can give evidence that is undoubted for the crucifixion, why place your faith in something that is not certain? We have certainty.
Can I just recommend a book as well for people who want to know about the historical Jesus? I've been reading this one. Can you see it?
Closer. The Mysteries of Jesus.
By Ruqayya Maqsood.
You told me about this one. Yes.
Yeah, she was a Christian PhD in theology, and mashallah, she wrote a book after embracing Islam in 1986 about the historical Jesus. Question, all the things I brought up about the Jewish tradition of 24 hours to recant for blasphemy, the putting someone on trial on the eve of all of these things. These are all the things that she brings up throughout the book. So I really recommend it. The Mysteries of Jesus by Ruqayya Maqsood. I recommend it to Christians because she used to be one of you. All right.
Inshallah. All right. Well, keep us in your du'as, and may Allah accept your fast over Ramadan. And yeah, we'll make a part 3 and we'll post it. Me and Abbas are going live tomorrow. Are we, Abbas?
I'm not sure.
Well, we are. I think we are. We are at that time, and the topic is to do with atheism, I believe. But so check us out then. But yeah, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Assalamu alaikum.